I do, let's see, I do have the PDF pulled up. We left off I don't even know if I'm trying to think if I got it posted. I don't even know if we got the intro posted, but um either way, we'll have everything kind of ready to go after this week. So yeah, no, the intro wasn't posted yet, but chapter one.
Chapter one, and maybe just because we've got a larger group here, let's
Yeah,
let's just take a second and recap
yeah, please.
some of the introduction, and see if are there comments, questions, things that stood out um, to you, meaning the group here, that you'd want to point out from the introduction, or the book in general to kind of get us started in a discussion mode.
I'll throw my 2 cents in there.
Yes, Jeremiah.
I read this book about a year ago just out of curiosity, and I loved it
Mm-hmm.
because, especially in this beginning chapter, it reminds you of the politics behind the surveying. And a lot of the stuff I didn't know. I mean, some of it I had heard of, but the politics behind the surveying is interesting to read because then you understand why they were mapping the way they were, not just the instruments they were using, but why they were coming up with these maps and the way they were. And that's an important history to know because often we're looking at maps from 17th, 18th century or 20th, early 20th century that were using essentially the same tools they'd been using 400 years before. The survey compass was still in use through the mid 20th century. I mean, that's something that blows your mind. They were doing the same techniques, or they had developed these techniques, uh, and they came from somewhere. And so that kind of history and origin of the measuring techniques and the processes they used for mapping, I thought was just really exciting.
Absolutely. And I think, we're dealing with that, Jeremiah, as we talk about even like these state plane updates. What does that
Yeah.
mean from a measurement standpoint and the deprecation of the US survey foot to an international standard? And we've even had discussions here at the UCLS when in the last couple of years some legislation for NAD 83, and what people don't realize is the NAD 83 is based off the meter, right? And we're picking and choosing what of those systems we adapt or apply. And so um, there's this repetition in history always. So I think we'll see a lot of that in what we deal with day to day and what we go through the book. Jen threw into the chat here that she missed the intro week. Got the book from the library. It has a different subtitle. There is another one out there, and I haven't opened it up to see if there's any substantial difference between the two. It should be the 2002 copyright, which is the cover that we've been showing. Has anyone grabbed that one or seen any difference or can help answer that?
I
Could
know.
you share that PDF again?
Yes.
This is the one we've been using.
This is the cover. This is what the cover should look like, yeah.
But there is one on. I did notice that. I thought that was a different book altogether because it had even a different tagline.
I think there's one called I just pulled it up again. It's how the untamed wilderness shaped that's yeah, there's kind of like a couple of different covers. Um,
Yeah.
Check the ISBN, it should be the same.
got it. How
And
the
if I,
United States was shaped by the greatest land sale in history. That's the one we're doing. But then he had another one called How the Untamed Wilderness Shaped the United States and Filled the Promise of Democracy.
I think that's a different one. That's the one I had seen. If you
Yeah.
let me share, Trent, I can show that one real fast. I've got it pulled up.
Uh,
The same author has the same book with the same title but a different subtitle.
kind of, yeah.
Aye.
Now we got this one. I
So
don't know if
this
it
would be,
shows up very well, but this is the one I have. And that's the paperback cover that's on the solid book.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the how the untamed wilderness shaped the United States. Yeah, that's the other one. Exactly. And that was 2002 as well. So that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, 2002.
Yeah.
well, we'll find out if we start getting in
Yes.
here and John and Jen are confused. We'll know why.
Yeah, this one says how an untamed wilderness shaped the United States and fulfilled the promise of democracy.
Yeah. And the other one is how the greatest land sale in history shaped the United States. That's technically the one we're reading right now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Same.
the yeah, the PDF you just pulled up on page 7 just looks identical.
Oh, does it? Okay. Well, that's
At least from what I remember it looked like.
Take more than an hour.
If they're different, we're ready for the next book.
yeah. All right. Well, so that's the cover, which
Yeah, that is a
how the
different
United
subtitle.
States was shaped by the greatest land sale in history.
Yeah, that is a different subtitle.
Yeah. And then Measuring America, same title, 2002. Interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting.
We're gonna find out here in a couple minutes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when I first Googled this to order this book, it came up with a couple of different versions. And
Yeah.
that's when I texted you and said, Is this the one?"
Yeah.
And but it
This
showed there
yeah,
were other suggestions like Thoreau the surveyor. I never even knew David Thoreau was a surveyor.
Yeah.
the contents there are identical.
Okay.
They've
Good.
got
All right. Good.
Okay, yeah, must have been
yeah,
a
that's
fluke
kind
there.
of
So David, what we did is there is no PDF for purchase, unfortunately.
We're
So
doing this for educational purposes only.
yep,
correct.
yep.
This how Measuring America is also an audiobook for those that want. It's on Audible through Amazon, or you can purchase the book as well. But so all right, well, hopefully whoops, page 7.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it. I've got a few things
There you go.
highlighted. This one, more than the other books we've read, I do ask for your guys' participation because it's not a textbook where we can teach out of it, right? This really does need to be more of a roundtable discussion. Otherwise, we're just going to be reading out of the book. There's not principles to go over and review from a boundary law standpoint or anything like that. So I'll just throw that plea out there to help out. So just starting in here, the second paragraph, I just highlighted a couple things. It says, in the earliest, such as Master John Fitzherbert's The Art of Husbandry, published in 1523, a surveyor still filled his original feudal role as the executive officer of landed noblemen. His duty was primarily to oversee the word surveyor. The word surveyor is derived from the French sur, over, and voir, see, the estate. He was to walk over the land and make a note of the boundaries, the butts and bounds of the tenants' holdings, and then to assist in drawing up the official record or court roll of what duties they owed. And I love this historic view of what a surveyor is. So often now we're coming back as retracement surveyors, and that's really what this is talking about. But I think we can elevate ourselves quite a bit if we think about this from an overseer point of view, that our true duty to protect, the public and to oversee the land, that ties, in my mind, our duty to work with other surveyors, to communicate the type of maps we produce and why and how we produce those maps. It brings a lot more reverence to my mind of our, if you will, sacred duty as surveyors to really protect boundaries. And even more so in today's society, where in 1523 you didn't have the general public holding land, right? You had noblemen, and the lords would be passed to a few, their holdings, but by and large, land ownership was not a common man's dream. And the difference today is that is, at least in the United States and most of the world, that is the everyman's dream, right? And, the Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all know the story. We talked about this in the introduction. There was a time where it was life, liberty, and property was contemplated in those tenets. And so we have this wonderful duty to protect that property. Any thoughts from you guys about our role as surveyors when it comes to, overseeing the
So basically, we were initially the tool of the aristocracy.
Absolutely. Originally, that's what it was, and for in that case, I mean, even notes it here. It was, the butts and bounds of the tenant's holding to then assist in drawing up the official record or court roll of what duties or taxes they owed, right, to the king, to the nobility.
Mm.
Yep.
And Trent, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Lori.
Okay. I just wanted to say I haven't started the book yet because I just ordered it. But I remember doing some research and learning that in England, the survey was actually like a community activity. Both landowners walk the line together, and I think in France it's still done that way, so that there's they try to build in agreement as they go. But back then it was like they had a party, at every corner they had a picnic or something like that. So I don't know if it'll be interesting to see if the author talks about the process of the survey.
I think that probably came a little bit later on in the process when they meeting of the bound type of thing.
Right.
Mm.
The common ownership became more common and transferred.
Oh, right. Yeah, it wasn't just an aristocratic experience. That makes sense.
By the end of that trip and all those parties, they were so drunk they didn't remember what they agreed on that last line, so there was always room for dispute.
Wasn't that called Terminalia Festival? It's every February or March,
Right.
and it's after the god Terminalia, correct?
You are correct.
Yep.
And why do we not still continue this?
Let's start it. Surveyors Week. Let's call it the Festival Terminalia.
We just
It's a
social
great
media.
idea.
It's on social media now. That's where it's at.
All a survey
Um,
just means something different now.
Mm-hmm.
David in the chat threw out there, in California, land surveyors remain a tool of the aristocracy. Common folk are unable to afford a boundary survey in most cases. Yeah, there's quite a bit to be said about that. I always talk about with my staff our lot surveys. Our little one-off subdivision they're putting a fence in. There's certainly a professional cost that goes with that product. And and there's those that do it on the super cheap, and then there's those that provide a professional product. And I always talk about that as that's my Costco chicken. That's my Goodwill survey. There's low reward and likely low risk for that. But that's what garners the goodwill in the community. I feel that's part of my professional duty as a surveyor. I'm simplifying that some. I'm certainly not losing money on many of those or all of them, but I like to think about my duty as a surveyor and helping the common folk that get stuck with a property, that needs surveyed and doesn't understand that. It's a great education opportunity as well.
Adding on that, what she mentioned, that in France they still walk the bounds. That is true. I've had some experience internationally, and they have a version of a survey they call bornage à l'amiable, where all the neighbors have to actually sign the documents when you do the survey as a surveyor.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
That is neat. Jerry, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make an observation here. When you look at what the surveyor's original role was as a resurveyor, not as an original surveyor, because his or her job was to locate where the nobleman's properties already were. So technically he was following in the footsteps that didn't occur yet, but he wasn't creating boundaries. So it wasn't until later that the surveyor was actually involved in the process of creation of boundaries. Originally, it was in the establishment of existing boundaries.
Great observation. Absolutely right. Those noblemen had put up fences, or in the English countryside, those old rock walls to establish that. Now they're being retraced. Jumping ahead here a little bit, we've covered some of what's in this chapter, and I love the dialogue we're having. But right at the top of page 8, it talks about, it defines to butt. To butt upon something is to encounter or meet it, for which the equivalent word was meet. And now we start seeing our modern equivalent of what these is, our meets and bounds surveys. This ancient method of surveying, which identified the boundary of an estate by the points where it met other boundaries or visible objects, thus became known as meets and bounds. Just point out here, if we look at the ancient meaning of butt or butt up against, and bring it into meets and bounds, that would solve potentially a lot of the issues we have. Right, going back to this old term, instead of a meets and bounds and we measure it, if we go to it butts up against the adjacent, how often are we going to resolve the gaps and the overlaps and the issues that us surveyors cause by changing our mindset to the butt survey, as it were, versus a meets and bounds or a measured survey? That's what they did then. They knew their tools were not all that great. I mean, we'll get here later on in the book to the invention of the chain, but really it was a bounded survey without measurements in many cases, because the tools for measurement were not that precise or ground for large pieces of property. And so what do you call it to? Well, the next best thing. It goes to, Lord Farquaad's property on the north, and whoever's, Prince William's on the east, and whatever around there, and it's butted against and really isn't measured.
Exactly. And being in South Carolina, I am in a meets and bounds state, and so many deeds are ambiguous because of that. Because of your bounds are on the north by Smith, on the east by Jones. Well, who's established that line?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There it goes back to the junior senior, right?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that this book, as well as the boundary control, legal principles books,
Yeah.
all seem to want to attribute meets and bounds to English words and very different variations, and they kind of seem to twist things around. But actually, the term meets and bounds comes from Roman law way back, and it was the two words were meta and bunda, and meta was if you think of the chariot races with the big audience, it's, around or surrounding this where the chariot races happened in this big oval. Well, inside that oval was a big long stretch with two pillars, a pillar on each end, and the meta was the platform between the two pillars, and that was the VIP seats, so you could sit and look down on the race and see it close up. So that was the meta, was the physical line itself, the monuments on the line, and the bunda being the turning point of the chariots on each end at those pillars. So you had a meta and bunda, and I've got a book on surveying, Roman surveying. It's really thick, huge, thick book on the Roman laws and stuff. And they talk about the surveyor being charged with going to, when there was a dispute, the surveyor was charged to go onto the ground and survey the land by meta and bunda, and basically tie in the physical objects that mark the boundaries. And when the surveyor was done, this is where the boundaries are, and that the people were bound to that to the survey. So he had an adjudicative authority almost to settle disputes by surveying by meta and bunda.
Wish we still
Meets and
had that.
bounds.
Well, that's funny because, it makes sense because Roman's all Latin and French
Yeah.
is derived from Latin. So basically, it's like us looking for deeds and going back through chains of title. When it comes to languages, almost everything goes back to, or at least a lot of things go back to the Latin. So that actually makes a lot of sense. I'm surprised the guy writing it didn't actually try to tie it all the way back like we do in our, every day.
And
Yeah,
the
it goes
Romans
back to
did
the
at one
Greek and
time
Latin
occupy
roots.
England, which is where English law comes from, is from that.
Yeah, it's also interesting too that there was the split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, and when that split happened, all the laws that were developed by in the Church of England, they detested anything to do with the Roman Catholics, and so anything that had the appearance of coming from Rome, they buried it and tried to invent their own reasons for their rules and things. The real interesting dynamic that happened there. And I think that's a lot of why we trace our lineage back to England, where most of the early settlers came from, of course. But yeah, it really goes a lot further back than that. Goes clear back to Rome.
This is great. This is great.
And they're physical. The other point I want to make too is you're talking about physical monuments all the way around. The Bunda are physical monuments. The Meta was a physical monument, and so it's boundaries really have physical properties. And we think of boundaries, we want to think of them in the mathematical terms of invisible points on each end with an invisible line that's a straight line between 2 points. Well, those are math definitions, mathematical definitions of line of a boundary. But the legal definition of a boundary is hinged upon the physical entities.
Yeah. Okay. And the book starts hinting to some of this, at least. I mean, not the Roman part, but at least what we're kind of getting into is as the role and what we were lying out there, and it continues in that that same paragraph about the middle of it. The dukes and barons, the king's tenants in chief, technically held their broad acres of the crown in return for the dues or service they paid, and their vassals held their narrower farms from the great lords in return for rent or service, and so on, down to the villeins, who often had no land at all but exchanged goods, service, or rent for the right to work it. what the 16th century manuals inadvertently reveal as they detail the surveyor's duty is how that order was subverted within. Under the old system, tenants farmed narrow strips or rigs of land, often widely separated, so that good and poor soil was distributed evenly among those who actually worked the land. And then the book gets into a couple of the publications that became the manuals for the time. It talked about in 1531, this is the bottom of page 8, in 1531 came the publication, The Book Named the Governor by Sir Thomas Eliot, which gave advice on the education of rulers and landowners. An essential part of their training was to learn how to draw so that, according to Eliot, they could make a map or figure of their estates. In this way, they would have a clear picture of what they owned. And then we get into, by 1609, John Norden could insist in the surveyor's dialogue that the map rightly drawn by true information describeth so lively an image of a manor as the Lord sitting in his chair may see what he hath, and where and how it lieth, in whose use and occupation every particular is. And I love that because to me that's the modern day ALTA survey right there. When I simplify what an ALTA survey is, I always say, think about the rich broker in New York that's buying an investment property. He has neither the time nor the inclination to go watch and walk his vast empire. So he wants that survey map to see everything that he owns and has rights to, and the encumbrances on his property. And I love that. The Lord sitting in his chair may seeth what he hath, and where and how it lieth, and in whose use and occupation every particular is. So I think that's our first ALTA survey right there in description. And it gets into some other maps and time frames here, and we'll just quickly go through some of these not only described in territory but asserted ownership of it as well. In 1549, a map of Newfoundland and the North Atlantic seaboard detailing Sebastian Cabot's discoveries was displayed in the Privy Gallery at Whitehall outside the Royal Council Chamber, so that foreign ambassadors waiting to see the sovereign would know of England's claims over was freshly discovered territories and the newly explored Pacific, Indian Oceans. He took care to dedicate it to the sovereign Philip II of Spain to ensure that Philip could find it in his own claims across the ocean. And then down at the bottom, we've got the plans parcellaries of aristocratic land were drawn before 1650. The Spanish maps appeared as early as 1508, but another 200 years passed before it became the custom for Spanish lords to measure their lands. Only in the economically sophisticated Netherlands, where the mathematician Gemma Frissus wrote the first manual on map making, a method of delineating places in 1533 were farms, especially those close to cities, measured and mapped. Yet even there, the aristocrats' landed estates remained feudal. But in England, estate maps were so common that an inventory of Henry VIII's possessions made his death in 1547 showed he had a black coffer covered with fustian of Naples, which was full of plats. So this really interesting as we get into, and the name of this chapter is the invention of landed property. And so we see all these plats over time becoming more sophisticated and more used. Again, just kind of rolling through as fast as we can without getting too much into these dates. But the next paragraph, if there's a single date when the idea of land as private property can be said to have taken hold is 1538. In that year, a tiny volume was published with a long title that began, "This book showeth the manner and measuring of all manner of land." In it, the author, Sir Richard Benesty, described for the first time in English how to calculate the area of a field or an entire estate. He was probably borrowing from Phidias. His values were purely English, noting that sellers tended to exaggerate the size of a property, whereas buyers were inclined to underestimate it. He advised the surveyor to approach the task in a careful and methodical manner.
So if you don't mind, I just want to jump back to the paragraph that begins at the end of page 9, the previous page. You were reading the second half, but I think that first sentence, when English landowners ordered a map of their estate, they were implicitly asserting a claim to ownership. That is actually a pretty significant statement, I think, because when we draw up a map today, what do landowners expect from our map? They want to know what they own, right? It doesn't matter what it is. They expect that our boundary survey or our ALTA or their subdivision plat is going to reflect what they own. And so this is something that's been around for hundreds of years.
So Jeremiah, let me put you on the spot here. I mean, this talks about the explicitness of asserting a claim, but you're a Utah surveyor. We've joked about this, you and I, that particularly in Utah, our survey is nothing but a record of our opinion. But then again, landowners rely upon that as far more than opinion. It's a professional opinion or a fact statement of ownership. How do we rectify the two?
That's a loaded question.
John is laughing.
We're all laughing at that question.
I know I put Jeremiah spot. I don't expect an answer, but it is a good point for discussion. Particularly, so I've got a new guy that started with me about 3 weeks ago, and I had to burst his bubble about the weight our surveys carry here in Utah. Well, not to discourage you from being licensed, but there is a caveat there. We've got to recognize our standing currently in society and what our surveys actually represent.
So, and that is true, but if you look at the context of what this book is saying, back in the 1500s, if you had a feudal lord telling you, "This is my boundary, this is what you're going to survey, this is what you're going to map," are you going to come back with something different?
Right.
No, you're not.
Right.
They're going to measure between the markers around the exterior of their strip and come back with measurements between each of those. But kind of getting back to your point, Trent, maybe all we provide is a professional opinion, but what ends up mattering, and it doesn't matter where you are in the United States, what ends up mattering is what you do with it. I mean, if you take that survey and you take action based on that survey to install a fence or a shed or another improvement, or to come to an agreement with your neighbor, or to do anything with it, then the value originates in what the landowner is doing, not so much that you had an opinion, but that the landowner accepted and acted upon that opinion. I think that's where the value comes. It has nothing to do with what we do. It has everything to do with what the landowner and their neighbors decide to do based off that opinion. And if they decide to dispute it, there's a venue for that as well.
And you're not going to be boiled in oil.
Not typically.
It may
Not
feel
literally.
that may feel like it if John's on the other side of the case.
That's
But
what I was just about to say. So think about 15, 20 years from now, as we're going through all these deregulation issues and the licensing that we went through to become a licensed professional is now degraded, and now you're just going off an opinion, right? Like how does that come into play? Jeremiah, like not if you're just going back to the 1500s, where you're told to survey this, but we've taken an oath as a professional to protect the both parties. Like I don't want to derail this whole conversation, but it's like, I mean, you think about 20 years from now as we fight these deregulation issues, like how do we continue this fight separate of what happened in the 1500s is you're told to survey this as to an oath that we're to protect,
Mhm.
right?
That's where I see chapter one really setting the
Yeah,
groundwork. This is
yeah,
what we were, and
yeah,
here we are today.
yeah. And this is where we don't want to go in 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a inclination
Sorry.
that we don't put enough I don't know we don't put enough of the responsibility on ourselves to make sure that the opinion we express is a valid opinion that the landowner can rely upon because he's paid us good money. We're professionals, we're licensed, we're tested. We should know what we're doing. And when we complete a survey and say, here's where the property is, yeah, we don't determine who owns it necessarily. That's a title question, but we certainly determine where the boundaries are. And yes, it's our professional opinion, and yes, it's subject to appeal, but a judge's opinion you can appeal to. You can appeal it all the way to the Supreme Court if you want to.
Yeah.
But because there's always and then you might get a 3-4 decision. Well, that doesn't mean 3 are wrong and 4 are right. It just means that it's a little bit of ambiguity going on, which we've all been confronted with. But we need to really, I think, take note of the fact that when we complete that survey and hand it off, that landowner is going to rely upon it, and we got to count on that. They're not buying a survey just so they have a pretty picture to hang on the wall. They're going to rely upon it to improve their properties, to construct their fences, to build their improvements, and to know that I can't go beyond this line because then I'm on my neighbor's property. And people will respect those lines as long as we draw lines that are visible and ascertainable. We're out there pounding rebar down to the ground to where it's an inch below the ground and then cover it up with leaves before we leave so that we protect our points or something. Well, no, the landowner needs to see those things. They're going to rely on those monuments. And the more visible and in your face they are with not only your client, but the neighbors, the more they're going to rely upon them. And the more they rely upon them, the less liability you have.
Okay.
Or in other words,
Jerry's had his, just a second, Jeremiah. Jerry's been so patient with his hand up. Let's let him have a chance. And I want to tack on to John, and then we'll go over to Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, there's two important things I think we need to look at from the origin of the surveyor to where we are today. One, the surveyor worked for the nobleman. The surveyor did not represent anybody else. And he was strictly like an attorney is today and an advocate for the nobleman.
That's where I was about to.
The nobleman did not own land.
Mhm.
He controlled land granted to him by the king. So the king defined where the extent was of the property because it was based on that the taxes were paid or the service would be that the Lord would provide for him. So it wasn't really the nobleman that was dictating where the boundaries are. The nobleman was acting with respect to what the grant was from the king. There was no individual ownership. Today, we don't act on behalf of a client. We act on behalf of where the boundaries were created. And that's where ownership comes into play. There is individual ownership now where there wasn't back before. So we've gone from, my original comment of the tool of the aristocracy into someone who's more of a public servant than an individual servant. And the ownership that we're dealing with is a different environment today than it was when our profession first started.
The land was given as opposed to bought to some degree, right?
Its use was granted.
Yeah.
from the central authority that owned all the land.
Yeah.
And that's where our country was different in its origin, in that the idea was that individual ownership was an important aspect of the development of this country from the onset.
Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of our country was King's Grant
Right.
in the origin.
Yeah. As the whole East would know more so than the West. But
Yes.
So I will say this part. John was alluding to this about what our duty is, and then how does the client use it. And I've turned down a number of jobs because they simply wanted a fence. They don't need the property line, right? And there's surveyors out there that will stake the fence line. And the honest answer, the reason I turn those jobs down is because what the client's reliance on it is. I could put every note and caveat that I have just staked the deed, or I staked the fence, or I've done whatever, but the professional product that I supply is relied upon, no matter what caveat I put on there, as what that is, the property line. And so we
that's a great point.
John and Jerry's point there is we are independent. Even though we work for a client, we need to be independent and ethical in our evaluation of all that evidence. But then to John and Jeremiah is that we got to look at what they use it for and what they rely upon it. They expect us to be the professionals and to give an opinion that they can rely on at the end of the day.
And that's why I love when John chimes in on any one of our programs that he does. But John comes in from a totally different standpoint of the mediation standpoint, as opposed to, this is what I'm going to tell you, go tell a judge to tell you what you own, right? And that's what I love. I love the two different perspectives, but John comes in from it, hey, let's work this out, as opposed to, this is where it is, and go let a judge tell you if this is where it's supposed to be, right? And the latter is what most of the profession has become, rather than the 5% that John Stahl does. So that's why hopefully more people that join these meetings gets John's, and the more people that attend your presentations, John, become School of John, rather than go let the judge figure it out.
So my comment after John, just to summarize the end of what you were saying there, John, is that, coming back to the book,
Yeah.
landowners that order a map of their estate are implicitly asserting a claim to ownership. At least that's what they're expecting. And so our work needs to be that solid. It needs to be clear. It needs to be an informed opinion that's backed by evidence, because that's what they're expecting. And this is not a new idea.
I think that's a great, Jeremiah. Right in the middle of page 10, can you measure
Everybody else lose Trent? Okay, yeah. Everybody
a
else.
piece of any land?
Hey.
Ye shall go about the bounds of it one measure in one parcel wholly. Oh,
You
you good?
Yeah, no, your Wi-Fi's been jumping in, or your internet's been jumping in and out. And I thought it was mostly me, but when I see everybody else looking and drinking, and then I'm like, oh, I know it's Trent stuff. So start your little segment. So we're in the middle of chapter 10 or page 10.
Yeah, right there. So it says, when ye shall measure a piece of any land, ye shall go about the bounds of it once or twice. I think that speaks to of how much effort we should put into it, and then consider well by viewing it, whether ye may measure it in one parcel wholly altogether. Measuring it in was necessary when the field was an uneven, irregular shape. By dividing it into smaller pieces, smaller regular shapes like squares and oblongs and triangles, it became easy to calculate accurately the total area. The distances were to be carefully measured with a rod or pole precisely 16.5 feet long, or a cord. And finally, the surveyor was to describe the area in words and to draw a plat showing its shape and extent. And then that, just the first sentence, that next one. Like the maps, this interest in exact measurements was also new. Until then, it mattered. What mattered was how much the land would yield, not its size, right? How much crop, how many sheep could you get on there, and I get a portion of that sheep. And now we're getting to this different story of size. What do I own? What is my domain? Which becomes the bigger discussion in today's society when we, in more urban areas, are starting to measure by the square foot or the square inch, and hundredths matter in what I can do and can't do on my land.
So one thing I want to say to that I noted back on page 8 was, the narrow strips or rigs of the land that they had. It amazed me, and even back on page 7, I mean, these things were 12 perches by 10 feet. If you do the math, that's 198 by 10. That's the size of these people's fields.
Yeah.
If you did 2 plow furrows, you're on somebody else's land. Crazy. But yeah, I love the use of rod and pole and then perch, which are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's great. I appreciate you doing that. It goes on to talk about the greatest real estate sale in England's history occurred after King Henry VIII dissolved a total of almost 400 monasteries. This is the top of page 11, and talked about what that meant from even a cash watershed standpoint. Changes underway with the feudal services, often commuted for rents, paid in coin. The feudal estates frequently mortgaged and sold. Up to that point, the fundamental value of the land remained in the number of people it supported. But we're seeing this change now in how the land was managed through there. The top middle page 12 says, that first paragraph, Jesus, sir, in the name of God, what mean you thus extremely to handle us poor people? A widow demanded of John Palmer, an enclosing landlord in Sussex, who, having bought the monastic estate on which she lived, had evicted her from her cottage. Do ye not know that the king's grace hath put down all the houses of monks and friars and nuns? Palmer retorted, therefore now is the time come that we gentlemen will pull down the houses of such poor knaves as ye be. This is that beginning of that revolution time, that the changing of the mindset of the rich and the poor that leads to really the creation of the Americas and starts building that movement. See what else I have highlighted here. I guess jump on over to page 13. It's got this little, in 1551, Robert Record wrote a book titled Pathway to Knowledge in praise of the accuracy that geometry offered surveyors, but warning of its potential for destruction. It says, surveyors have cause to make much of me, and so have all lords that lands do possess. But tenants, I fear, will like me the less. Yet do I not wrong, but measure all truly, and yield the full right to every man justly. Proportion geometrical hath no man oppressed. If any be wronged, I wish it redressed. Any thoughts there?
So what I had highlighted was a little further down on page 13. I don't know if you're getting to that. What we can.
Well, if we can, but let's just read maybe that next first paragraph that kind of gives probably where you're leading to. It says it was against this background an urgent growing need for accurate measurement of land that Edmund Gunter devised his chain. And then Aaron, yeah, go for it.
So everyone here knows the Gunter chain. I did not know that Gunter was the one who actually, if you go down to the last paragraph, um, he he devised that, what I highlighted was the point at which the enthusiasm for numerical ratio touched upon concrete reality was trigonometry. So I am the Trigstar chair, so
Yeah.
that caught my eye immediately, which allowed mathematicians to calculate the length of two sides of a triangle when only the third side of two angles were known, but also enabled surveyors to work out the distance between objects without having to walk between them. I had no idea that it was Gunter who actually did that. Pythagorean wrote the Pythagorean theorem. Trigonometry was long established before Gunter, but Gunter is the one who brought it to surveying.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I thought that was amazing. I did not realize that. Everyone knows the Gunter chain, 66 feet.
Yeah.
The links are hundreds, but to know that now he was instrumental in trigonometry being a part of surveying, love that.
It's our new PowerPoint coming up for the Trickstar presentation.
Yep.
I love that. That's a great observation. And the ability of these men to understand those ratios and calculate that out, given the tools they have, is pretty amazing, right? This idea that he just ratios and proportions were his passion, and he found this way to create this easy mathematical system for them to use is pretty neat.
Yep, and when they talk about the law of sines and cosines and all that, I mean, it's just that page 13 so far is my favorite page of the book.
Yeah, I just pulled that up. Even for Google, it says that he was practical introducing the terms cosine and cotangent,
Yep,
creating the first log tables for sines and tangents.
yep, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's jump to page 13 and learn a little bit more about him. I'm going to jump to the last paragraph. It's really the bottom half of page 14. It says, since only the most basic instruments existed in Gunter's day, mathematicians and astronomers were expected to design their own and to demonstrate problems in geometry. Gunter himself was constantly adapting and improving nautical instruments like the quadrant and the cross staff, which measured vertical angles between the sun and the horizon, or horizontal angles between towers and trees and churches. Indeed, his enthusiasm for new gadget cost him the best scientific job in the land. In 1620, the wealthy but earnest Sir Henry Saville put up money to fund Oxford University's first two science faculties, the chairs of astronomy and geometry. Gunter applied to become professor of geometry, but Saville was famous for distrusting clever people. Give me the plodding student, he insisted drearily, and the candidate's behavior annoyed him intensely. As was his habit, Gunter arrived with his sector and quadrant and began demonstrating how they could be used to calculate the position of stars or the distance of churches until Saville could stand it no longer. Do you call this reading of geometry? He burst out. This is mere showing off tricks, man, and according to a contemporary account, dismissed him with scorn. Dan, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
No.
Maybe.
I can't believe they didn't burn him at the stake.
Yeah.
Right.
You're good now, Dan, I think.
Okay, good. For some
Yep.
reason, I got one mic, but there's two mics to choose from, and they say the same thing. So, so I'm waiting for my book to get delivered, so I don't have anything highlighted. So I'm just going off of what I listened to on the Audible. One thing that Gunter impressed me with, and it's kind of scary, especially now that AI is becoming more prevalent. Even in my day, I mean, we rarely do any math anymore. It's all done on a computer and a data collector and all that stuff. Is how much of those people back then, even Eratosthenes, who looked on a well to figure out what the diameter of the Earth is, how those guys just thought about that stuff. And right now, it's like we're a slave to Google. Like I don't even have to remember anything.
Yeah.
I can just go Google it really quick. So it's actually kind of scary how things are these days compared to back then, and how impressive it was they were just thinking all the time.
We're one magnetic storm away from total loss of civilization.
Yep, yep. I was in Red Rock Amphitheater when that May storm came through a couple years. Was that last year? When you can see the northern lights in Lake Michigan. And I'm the RTN administrator here in Iowa, and everybody goes, "Oh, that's cool." And I said, "Well, it's not really cool for much of your electronics, but
Yeah.
it looks cool."
Pretty.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a crew up at Snowbird this week, which is one of the ski resorts, and it was just topography, and they just had to shoot a bunch of trees. And not to knock my crew, but I will because I teased him all week about it. He's can't quite get under the trees with the GPS to get accurate measurements on all the trees, but so you got to set the gun. It was dense forest. He's like, "Oh, it's going to take me forever to go shoot every tree here," and I'm like, "You have got it so soft when you think that it's going to be hard just to go a bunch of trees and get to like that's how soft we've gotten that. Oh, the GPS doesn't work in here. I don't know how to do it. It's too much work to go shoot this. Is there any way we could do it differently?" And yeah, we'll be in for a rude awakening one day.
As Jerry says, his theodolites, tapes, and transits and dumping levels will keep working no matter what.
That's true.
And the field book.
No batteries.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's jump on through here. We're making good progress through this. We just have a few more pages left, but jumping down, I'm going to jump way ahead here. It is quite a bit about some supporters of Gunter and a few other things, but the bottom of page 15, it talks about the complete collection of Gunter's writing, issued in 1624, was titled "The Description and Use of the Sector, the Cross Staff, and Other Instruments for Such as are Studious of Mathematical Practice." By then, he must have known the last bit of the title was nonsense. The reason the book had to be in English was that his instruments were being used not by math students, but by surveyors for measuring and by sailors for navigating. John, Jerry, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just want to point out the commonality between then and today. If you go back up the paragraph, it says like electronic devices today that were sold with a book of incomprehensible instructions. Gunter at least had the excuse that almost no one could understand his instructions because they were in Latin. I tell you right now that that's one of the worst things in contemporary is for people who generate software or technology is to put together a comprehensible set of instructions for it. My wife has got a little Kia car that we just bought, and the entertainment system manual for it is 300 pages. And I still, how do you turn on and just find a radio station is basically all I want to know. But that's something we have in common. We've not yet mastered the art of sensible documentation.
How many buttons are on that entertainment system?
Depends on where the entertainment system ends and the navigation system begins, and the heat and air conditioning system. It's all integrated into one giant central infotainment system. Not like on my 76 Le Mans, it's got on, off, bass, treble, and push buttons for the stations.
That's made so you can't work on it yourself. You have to bring it back to the dealership.
I'm restoring a
Might
79.
be Latin.
I'm restoring a 79 Jeep CJ5, and that's got a manual in there that is readable, doable. I can take it apart, put it back together. It's been a lot of fun to play with that one. I just painted it. We're painting contour lines on it. I got to find a map to project on there to do. It's gonna be my survey buggy.
Is anybody else, is William's voice crackly? Okay. All right.
Okay, I don't know what's going on, guys. Apologize for that.
Just got your robot voice on.
Yeah, I know.
So,
Yeah, try to do the same thing they had me do. Try turning off your video and let's see if the audio.
Yeah. See if it
might
picks
be
it up at all.
Signal.
yeah. Does that help any? Does that sound a little better?
Nope, that one didn't.
It's weird. I'm in the office. I'm hard plugged into the
Yeah.
internet, so I shouldn't have Wi-Fi or internet issues or anything. But
You're on that good fiber line. It's not working.
I guess. Okay. Well, let's keep going here then. Jumping over to 16. First paragraph in 16. It says, in this book, Gunter first described the chain that was to bear his name. For plotting of ground, I hold it fit to use a chain of 4 perches in length, divided into 100 links. The practical appeal of the chain was that, unlike a rod, it was flexible enough to be looped over a person's shoulder, and that, being made of metal, it neither stretched nor shrank, as cords always did. Other kinds of chain had been devised, but the supremacy of Gunter's came from his fascination with ratios and the relationship of one set of numbers to another. As a passionate believer in the usefulness of math, he built into his chain the most advanced numerical learning of the time, until it could almost be compared to a primitive calculating machine. I know many of us surveyors, in our societies, we chase after a chain. We've paid way too much money for one at auction, have them sitting in our office and ignore them. But who's had the opportunity to actually go fling one over their shoulder and play with it and try and measure with a chain? Aaron has. So I've never done it with a chain. I've used a steel tape, which obviously has measurements on there and has some of the same benefits. It's not the automatic math or the ratio math that you see in a Gunter's chain, but those that have done it old school, what are your thoughts? Surveying that way.
I did it in college in 1992 at Paul Smith's College. My professor, Creighton C. Fee, was about 80 years old at the time. So he was very, very old school about how he taught surveying. So we all had to know how to throw the steel tape, and we all had experience with the Gunter's chain.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, not the Gunter's chain, but always the steel tape and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, try unplugging your mic and plugging it back in, maybe just by chance.
Yeah, let me reach around to do that.
I know I only got like 15 minutes left, but
We've only got 2.5 pages left, so.
yeah, no, we didn't think we were going to get an hour and a half out of this.
So well, he's doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to touch on this at the end, but I know we're not meeting next week because of the NSPS.
Check.
So we're going to read 2 chapters to the next one.
No, we're still good. Just kind of doing one a week, so it would be
Okay.
the 22nd. Yeah, we were typically going to drag this out till the middle of May, just doing one a week.
Yeah, I mean they're all like 10 pages. I mean it's nothing
Yeah.
daunting.
Yeah, I think sometimes they may last. Sometimes they may last 90 minutes. Sometimes they may last 45 minutes. But I think the intent was we'll just kind of we'll do a chapter a week. And although I think towards the end it was like two, we were going to do like 17 and 18, but we'll see what happens. So
Yeah.
It all depends on how much you guys. This has been probably one of the most
Yeah.
involved discussions we've had in any of the books. We
And
usually
Trent,
have two or three of us talking, but
I know.
whatever you did to your microphone worked.
I know it's perfect now. Yeah, no,
good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that. So I appreciate everyone's discussion because that helps us go by. I mean, it helps us take the full time. But I think this has been one of the best sessions of Wisdom Wednesday based off of everyone's input and discussion. So this is exactly what I've been hoping for since we started this. So
yeah. Dan, it'll be on the 22nd. I'll find your email and I'll shoot you the calendar. Anybody who else wants it, I'll shoot you the calendar. There's like an Outlook calendar, and you can just save it down, and you'll have everything in your calendar. So it'll be the next one is on the 22nd.
okay, well, let's just go through the rest of the chapter. Talks about some of the details of the Gunter's chain. I'm going to jump to the bottom of 18, and I'm just going to finish out 18, and then jump to the end on the end of 20, and I think that'll wrap us up here. But middle of 18, the basic technology was simple. In the field, the surveyor needed a compass to know which direction his line was running. In the 17th century, a telescope was attached to the compass so that distant marks could be seen more distinctly, and the instrument became known as a circumferentor and the Gunter's chain to measure how far the line ran. At the end of a day working on the land, the surveyor had to transfer the distances and directions he had physically walked over into a plat or sketch map, drawn to scale using dividers and a calibrated rule. Until the 16th century, the math was based on the 2,000-year-old theorems of a school of Greek mathematicians, notably Euclid, who taught in the Egyptian city of Alexandria. Their study of geometry, literally earth measurement, was prompted by the practical difficulties faced by Egyptian surveyors reconstructing boundary markers washed away by the Nile's annual flood. And so it was appropriate that their theorems concerning the properties of triangles, squares, circles should have been adopted by later surveyors needing to calculate the area of an unevenly shaped field. And then jumping to just the last paragraph there on 20, it says, this was the power that lay in Gunter's chain, a means of making private property, so long as it was the acre that expanded or shrank while the price remained the same, no true market in land could be established. Once the earth could be measured by a unit that did not vary, supply and demand would determine the price, and it could be treated as a commodity. That was not Gunter's intention, but it was a consequence of the accuracy that was built into his means of measurement. And I think that gets into tying back to some of the stuff we talked about in the introduction. We talked about land as a commodity, and much about what the work we do today is land as a commodity. Whether it's someone's dream of buying and owning their own house and land, and that is in itself a commodity because it's got a price, it's got a market, it's sellable, or it's a commodity for one of the biggest employers of surveyors are developers, right? And they're out subdividing land and creating their own product to then sell. There's a commodityness to that process as well. And so I like that closing statement. That wasn't Gunter's intention. His intention was to create a better measurement tool. But as society progressed, what came out of that was the ownership of land, the American dream, and with that, I'll say the negative commodity of land. But I don't truly mean that.
Just on this side, I'd like to comment something really quick. That paragraph you read about geometry and the difficulties the Egyptian surveyors had to go through. One thing I love about this book is that Linkletter has a very easy style of writing. It's easy to read, it's easy to understand. That paragraph alone is a book. I mean, there's so much information packed into two sentences.
Yeah.
And for us who have somewhat of a background in land surveying history and perhaps a little bit more information about what the Egyptians had to go through, some more than others, I mean that whole thing gives context to what Gunter was trying to overcome and improve upon. That I mean, more so than the 5 paragraphs preceding it and the 3 paragraphs afterward. I mean, it's a beautiful paragraph, and these show up all the time in this book. It's great.
It is a good depiction of the change in mindset as well. You look at the beginning of the book, it talks about land being what measured by what it could yield rather than what it actually was measured, what its metes and bounds were. What could this land yield compared to what it actually is? It's a difference in mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Just in one chapter, there's a difference in mindset. I like it.
And then it can lend to how do we measure today? We talked about in Waddles and evidence and procedures, the respecting of the historic measurements, right? We come in with a GPS or a total station or 3D scanner and think we can measure, to the 100th of a foot or to the 1,000th of a foot because some computer reads that out. But understanding how and what they did, right? And the evolution of those measurements from a retracement standpoint, how beautiful is understanding what it was to understand how we retrace it, right? The Gunter's chain, while wonderful, has had its drawbacks, right? It had its potential for mismeasurements or misclosures, and we have to take the ancient into account in our modern retracement, which is something we forget about too often. Okay. Well, any other thoughts or comments from this week's chapter?
Great as always.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys, for the discussion, and then we'll meet the 22nd we said, and
Yep. I'm gonna shoot everybody that was on tonight and registered tonight. I'll shoot the calendar invite out right now.
yeah. So chapter
Thank
2
you.
is precise confusion. I'm really excited about that chapter heading. Precise confusion.
Exactly.
Thanks, you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
More
Appreciate
interesting tangents to come.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it. That's
so
what it's
to
all about.
speak.
See you, everybody.
See ya.